parenthood, and I brought along one of my favorite humans. I'm not gonna lie.
Don't
This
lie.
is Kelsey,
Give the people a
and
favor.
I feel like I thrive in parenthood because I have Kelsey in my corner. Like we definitely mom together, 1,000%. But something that I really appreciate about you, Kels, is that um, with the events that have been happening and with Black Lives Matters and just like conversations about race and white privilege and everything, like I feel like I've had these conversations with you for a while now because you chose to change up your literature and you chose to like pursue and read and learn and do the work and listen to different voices and for people of color. So that's why Kelsey's here today. We're going to have that conversation with how to talk to our kids about race and like why that's important. So I'm just going to start off and ask you, like, tell us your story. Tell us why things have changed
Thanks, Sarah.
over a year ago. Yeah.
Yeah, so over at the beginning of 2019, so it's been, I guess, like a year and a half, we were in the process still of foster care and about 2.5 years into that journey. And at that point, it was looking fairly certain that we were going to be adopting Arlo. And I just was overcome by the realization that I knew very little about how to parent a person of color. And as I began those conversations, I was realizing it's not even just about parenting a person of color, but it's really about like the experience of people of color that I was unaware of. And I read a book. Scott and I, for our 10-year anniversary, went to South Africa and read a book called The Hate You Give on My Way Out There. And then while we were there, we listened to a book on tape by Trevor Noah called Born a Crime. And both of those books talk a ton about what it's like to be a person of color in America. And just like, yeah, really, really hard stories, both of them. Trevor Noah, his is a lot more about being South Africa, but he grew up during apartheid. And it really began then. Scott and I just started having tons of conversations about what we're reading and learning and just the direction our life was taking and how could we best, really it centered around how can we best parent a person of color at that point. But then it really turned into like, this conversation is not just for us, this conversation is for everybody. I think it's important for all of us to hear the stories of people that are our neighbors, that live all around us. And so I sort of took a vow in 2019 to consume as much as I could, much literature as I could that would give me more of an idea of the experience of people whose lives were different from me. And it's a really broad topic. And so I messaged 2 or 3 friends who I knew were readers and who I trusted their opinion and asked them to send me their best lists. And they did. And I just I literally, I think in 2018 had read 4 or 5 books. In 2019, I think I read like 16 or 17.
You devoured.
And it started, yeah. And already this year, we're in June, and I've already read like 17. I think I just haven't been able to stop since January of 2019. And I partly was just because my mind just was blown open. And I joined a book club as well, where the only premise was the authors were women of color. So, I mean, I've read novels and memoirs and everything under the sun. It's poetry. I haven't just been reading fiction or nonfiction. It's been everything. And so, and it's become really relevant, but I will by no means say that I am an expert on the topic. I just feel like I've learned a lot through the last couple of years.
Yeah. And you've modeled for me, in our friendship. And I really appreciate that. I think if we think about that, we have an impact with the world, but our impact starts at home, right? It starts in our heart, starts at home, and then it leads out to our communities. And so because of you, I've been inspired to read and do the same and start my own work. And my collection has doubled since last year. It's okay. And it's a lot. I love it. And with that, have you felt like that has helped you to talk to your children about race?
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting. I was actually talking with my therapist of saying like, I feel like this has become a really important thing for me to do and to read and to consume, but I don't know how to translate that to my family. Like I don't, and especially as the news stories started picking up and it just felt scary and hard. And it's like my kids are ages 7, 5, and 2. My youngest son, the 2-year-old, is the one we adopted, and I didn't know how to do it, and so she was like, just start from the beginning, like start, just talk about their brother, talk about the people around you, just like you do with little kids. Like you walk outside and you're like, there's a birdie in the tree and the grass is green, and you just start verbalizing the world around you as you're living. And so yeah, that became, I think, the best way for me to start talking to them was like literally just talking out loud and putting it in their terms. I wasn't like, things I was wrestling with, I obviously wasn't like asking my kids to solve or to figure out or to process with me. But maybe just asking them questions that were age appropriate for them.
Yeah. And then answering their questions.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've had like,
and they do, they have questions, and I can talk about
they don't understand too. My kids don't understand why there's so much hatred.
Yes. Yeah. And they're smarter than we realize, and they pick up on more than we think. I wanted to talk about this article I read in a second, but one of the things in an article I read recently was saying that kids from birth are recognizing race and processing it. And from 3 to 6 months, they can begin mentally to identify the difference. And by age 3, they're already using words, and positive and negative. Yes, Surreal Abraham. So it's like, what that tells me is by age 3, we're probably thinking about, they're still too young to even have a conversation. We're probably years from even beginning, and they have already come up with certain ideas of race in their head. And so the point is, it's never too early. It's never too early to start talking about it. And I think what that looks like is like, it's not healthy to be colorblind. It's not good to say like we're all the same, but to be able to be like, look how beautiful that is. Or okay,
yeah, we had a glitch and Kelsey's iPad died. So we're gonna start with, what are some of the resources that you've been using to help you talk to your kids about race?
I would love to maybe compile some more, and then I will comment on the post here with a list of a lot more resources. But I would just say, like, stay interested. So I found a ton on Instagram of just different people talking about, right now there's a ton of information out there, how to talk to your kids. I asked friends, and I kind of got curious and sort of dug up different ones. And I think we have all the access for it, like at our fingertips. My favorite one is, there is a profile called The Conscious Kid on Instagram. And that one has some really, really, really great resources. Sorry.
No.
Emily's out here with me now. So The Conscious Kid is my favorite. The article that I was referring to earlier was one that they had posted that I had read through there. And I love it too, because they do, like, their daily posts are just little things to consider, or things to talk about with your kids, conversation starters. And they break things up really well by age, so that it's age appropriate as well.
Yes, that's so great. Please do share that. We'll put it down in the comment section. And then if you guys are watching this and you have any resources you've loved or books that you're reading with your kids, we'd love to hear that. You have a book,
that's another thing I was
Race Cars, right?
Yes, that's the other thing I was going to say. I found a ton of kids books.
Yes, me too.
Out there. So I think the more books you can buy that have kids of color in them, that alone just spurs on conversation. And it's important for kids to see other kids that look different from them, but that they can still relate to.
So I had another question for you. I had a conversation with a friend who was talking about wanting to shelter her kids from what's happening. And I understand that, like, wanting to protect our kids, but I also at the same time have been pretty vocal about it. So I want to hear your thoughts on that, like with
Um, if I had more time, I would probably put this a little gentler. But because we're short on time, I'm just gonna say it like it is. But like that exactly is white privilege.
Mhm.
The fact that we can shelter our kids, the fact that it's an option. And I think we're ultimately doing them a disservice by not talking to them about real experiences from the real world, because they, like I said, by age 3, they're already making up their own decisions. By age 5, they're going to be influenced by other kids.
Mm-hmm.
By age 7, they've now had 4 years, like more than half their life, where that is becoming more and more ingrained. And if it's the news that we're trying to shelter them from, no, I don't think we should be showing our kids videos, of George Floyd and whatever it is, if that's not age appropriate. If that's not something you feel like would be appropriate for your child, I totally understand that. But I think not talking to them at all it's saying something. Like, not saying anything is saying something.
Right.
And it's not saying good things. And so I think that we as parents don't have a choice.
Yeah.
I think we have to.
Right.
Yeah. Hey, Evie Boo.
Yeah, white privilege can check out because it's not affected. And that's kind of been my motto, especially as I felt like, well, this is heavy. I'm like, this is a drop in the bucket, and I'm not going to check out.
Yeah.
It's heavy.
And sitting with our kids in the hard is gonna, like, that speaks volumes.
Mm-hmm.
And even saying to them, like, I don't fully understand, or this is hard, like, this is confusing to mommy and daddy too. This is, like, I get I get it. I get wanting to do that. It's all of our first instinct. It's our mom heart is to protect our kids. And that itself isn't bad. But I think, ultimately making the choice to say nothing is going to hurt our kids in the long run. And again, I wish I could sugarcoat that a little bit more, because I feel like it sounds harsh, and that's not my personality at all. But I just think that's the truth.
It is the truth. I saw this quote. I was trying to find it. I don't know. It's about like the fact that we often try to shelter our kids, but when our kids experience pain, hurt, sadness, that's when they get to experience the fullness of God and his love. And it's easy for us to protect them from that, but we have to allow them to feel those feelings. I like go back to that movie, The Inside Out, we need sadness. We need those different emotions. So this is just another one. Like, this is important. This is really
so important.
We're talking about changing the next generation. It starts at birth.
Yeah. And also, things get harder to talk about the older your kids are. It's not going to get easier one day. It's not like all of a sudden one day we're like, oh, like, now we can talk about hard things and it's not going to be hard. It doesn't go that way. I think use your wisdom, use what you feel like is appropriate. You know your kid best. And so talk to them about it in a way. It could be as simple as, like, you know what, like, I'm not sure if you've heard of things going on, but the world can be ugly sometimes. And what's important for us is to love our friends and our neighbors. And no matter, even if they look different than us or act different than us, that's what's most important. It can be as simple as that. Like, you don't have to go into
all the things,
but say something, please.
Yeah. So good. Well, you've kind of answered some of my other questions, but I just want to say thank you. I was going to ask, we kind of talked a little bit about conversations you guys have had around your house. Did you want to add anything else to that? Like, what have your conversations looked like? Have you
actually, I do want to say one thing.
Kids?
I'll say one thing. So we, when sort of things hit the fan a couple of weeks ago and started getting more and more intense, and Scott and we did sort of struggle with, like, we do feel like it's important to talk to our kids. We don't know how. Like, we definitely have that conversation together. Like, what does this look like? How do we do this? And so what it ended up looking like the first time is okay, 1 second to me. Sorry. What it looked like was we had gotten Chick-fil-A and we were at the park with our kids, and we're like all eating, and I think one of my kids said something that I was like, oh, on that topic, like sort of awkwardly like transitioned. And I was like, you know what, guys? And we stumbled through that conversation. I'm like, I don't think they heard anything. And I honestly walked away being like, well, like, okay, sit back down. I'm trying to tell you something that's important. Like, don't throw chicken nuggets at your brother. Like, please listen, this is important. And we laughed afterwards because we're like, we totally had this idea in our minds that it was like going to go smoothly. It was gonna be like this in-depth, heartful conversation. And it's just not. And Scott and I were like, but you know what? It opened up the door. Like, it's not always going to be pretty and perfect, but we did it. And it was more for us that time than it was for them, because we needed some practice, I think, to just say, like, we have something to talk to you about that we don't know how to talk to you about, but I want to talk to you about it. And so since then, we've been able to read books together and ask questions. And as soon as like our kids bring it up, and it comes up in our house often because they have a brother that looks different from them. And so we get to have that conversation, and I'm really thankful for that. And I know that's not everyone's experience, but jump on it whenever your kids do.
Yeah, that's so good. It's kind of like, I hate to compare it, but the sex talk, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they ask you, continue answering questions as long as they're asking, and don't be afraid and don't shake or hide from it, but like approach it and say, yeah, buddy, I'm so glad you asked that, or I'd love to talk to you about that. And that's a good question.
Good. Yeah.
I love that. If you guys have a chance, another resource is uncomfortable conversations with a Black man.
Oh yeah.
Oh my, what's his name? Now I lost it. Emmanuel. Yikes. Anyway, I can't think of his name.
I want to say Sanders, but that's a Broncos player.
But he just talked to Chip and Joanna Gaines. And I love the questions that their kids asked him. And we shouldn't ever shame our kids with the questions. Like Everett had a weird question, and I like was shocked by it. And then I'm like, wait, I don't want to like shame him into that. So again, it's awkward. We're going to mess it up, but we have to continue to press into that versus like hiding from it or resisting it.
Yeah.
So
and it doesn't have to be like a whole thing. Like when they're done, you can, it can be, you can be done. You don't need to like keep pounding it, because you don't want to also put in certain ideas of like, no, we need to talk about this. Like it's serious. Like just let it be cool, man.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for hanging out. I could come over there, but we have kids everywhere, flying all over the place.
Everywhere, literally.
We promise to share the resources below. Thanks for hanging out with us. If you guys have any resources you want to share, we would love to hear that and continue this conversation with parents and as we move forward for sure. So, all right. Thank you, friends.
Cool. Yeah.